Alright, now that I finally have the actual Reef Slider guide out, I figure I can talk about my stage preferences for Wringer, and I'll try to go over them and talk about them a little bit. I don't think there's really too large of a difference between them. Like, it definitely matters, but I'll try to, like, rank them all in order from worst to best. So, let's start with the worst one. I think Eeltail Alley is the worst Wringer stage in the game. There's this little ramp here, these little blocks over here. There's a lot of cover from Slider. If you slider down here, there isn't really anything to explode. You can't really contest the bridge easily. I think like playing down here is pretty good, or like down here, but they're pretty limited. On retake, I think Slider is just awful. Like, it doesn't affect anything up here. You can't slider this area, so Slider just doesn't do anything on retake unless one of their players like really overextends. So I think there's just a little too many problems. Oh, this is only the regular Wringer. I have kind of come to the conclusion that, like, I don't think Dread D is worth it anywhere besides maybe this stage. And, like, it's only considered for this stage because Reg Dread is really tough here. I think, like, your plays for this map, if you're going to try, is you try to, like, get control of one of these sides. You play for really deep sliders back here, try to flank around, or just pull back here. And then you can try to hold bridge pretty well if you get bridge control. But that's really about everything I think you could do. That map kind of sucks. Next is Lemuria Hub. Lemuria. So, I think that slider here isn't too bad. This corner can be pretty good. You can hit around this wall. You can hit around this corner. Slider on the platforms is kind of awkward. Sometimes it cuts off your slider up here, which sucks, because like sliding to clear all of this is usually pretty good. You also have to be careful for the platform if you're slidering across over there. On retake, you can like kind of poke anywhere you want, really. Like bucket angles are pretty good for poking any of this stuff. So you can get a lot of, I hit back too much, a lot of space over here. I just think the main problem is on holds. The slider isn't too great. Like, even if they drop, there's like a lot of little pieces of cover they can use. A lot of height elevations here with like some slopes. So it's not too hard to deal with and punish slider on this map. So I feel like Dread on a retake isn't that helpful, and on hold it isn't that great either. So there's just not too much to do there. Moving up is Inkblot. Where's Inkblot? Inkblot. I think everything here is like a lot better already. Slidering, you basically have to use it here on plat, on hold. Like when your team pushes really far ahead, this is like the furthest you'll ever get your sliders, so it's a very limited angle. People can always tell what you're doing, where you're going. There's not really any mix-ups. You can kind of like slider left, you can slider down here, you can slider bottom right, you can slider over here. So like you have a few slider spots on retake. None of them are amazing, but none are like too bad. And like slidering to the left is what I prefer to do, because you still kind of force these people to clear the ledge in case you blow up down there. So I don't think that's too bad. I think Dread's main is okay here. Usually play down here, you poke plat, you can like cover flank and plat at the same time. I think that's fine. But I don't think there's anything too exceptional in this stage, in my opinion, so that's why it goes there. Next up is Sturgeon. If we can get to Sturgeon. Sturgeon's just another lockout heavy one, so slider isn't too helpful. It's also kind of hard to use on defense. Like, you can kind of slider here and go behind this wall, but that's about it. You don't really do anything to help clear spinner, though the main can be pretty good there if you get sniped. So I tend to play snipe, like kind of go here, clear the spinner, then go right side and look for a slider across zone or down here if I see anyone extending, but that's really about it. Once they push up really far here, you can kind of clear ledges like this, but I just think you don't help that much on retake on a stage that's so, like, attacker favored. And when you're attacking, like, the slider angles just aren't that great. There's not really anywhere for you to go. You can play spinner really well, but so can a lot of other weapons, so you don't, like, particularly need your Dread to do it. So, that's why it goes here. Flounder. Where's Flounder? You'll notice a pattern with these stages. like, retake is really tough for these maps, because Slider doesn't hit key positions, usually because of, like, ledges or high ground. There's another one, like, you kind of just Slider here. In order for your Slider to be useful, you have to be, like, all the way over here to Slider their zone. Or, like, blow up down here and clear this. But, like, if you're already all the way over to your side of zone, you've already gone through the hardest part of the map. Dread can, like, poke over walls decently well. You can, like, camp this spot alright, but not as well as other weapons. Like, most of the time, people will be able to climb the wall before taking damage, and then your kill time's kind of slow. I prefer something like Dynamo here that just, oh, they peek the wall, Dynamo just kills you. I think you just play Dynamo this map in general. It's better here. If you have a cooler, I think you just, like, I'm probably just going to start using Chump Dynamo here instead. Because, like, even the chumps going up are probably way more helpful than the Slider. There's also a lot of small ramps and height elevations that cut off your Slider. On hold, it's, like, okay, you can kind of just Slider down the ramp and play oppressive there, but it's, like, it doesn't really help what you need for the map. So, even the things it's good at aren't, like, that exceptional. And then there's Marlin. Marlin might not be as low as I'm ranking it. It might just be my personal preference. Slidering zone kind of sucks. You have to do this, like, diagonal angle from the grates to get all the way to the center. So, like, you have to slider from that part on the grates to get to the center of the map. Because if you slider from here, you blow up further away. Less of a chance of capping. And even then, it doesn't full cap. So the slider cheese on this map kind of sucks. Slidering from fan to zone is okay. I like being able to paint from fan. I like being able to sit down here or over here. Painting from fan is good. You can kind of contest flank okay, or play the flank yourself. Actually, yeah, this map isn't that bad. This is, like, up here. I think it's just mostly a defense thing. There's a decent amount of spots you can play. You'll usually reef, like, one of these two areas, depending on where their team is going. You can't really reef fan, because they can just raise the fan, and your slider gets cut off. Slidering here is fine, just because, like, they have to drop here. So if you have cooler and you can QSJ out, it's fine, but if you don't have cooler, kind of sucks. But for the most part, like, relatively good amount of positions to play. Just the retake is a bit tough. Umami Ruins. Alright, I'm gonna try to go a little faster through these because it's gonna get kind of repetitive by now, but, like, look at where the defenders go. You can't slider it, so you can't clear it. The main weapon can attack it okay. Main weapon is, like, pretty good down here. You can slider, like, this diagonal, and the grates go up, and you can blow up people here. I still catch a lot of people with that. So it's good at least on defense at clearing, like, what is it? That way. You can clear this spot pretty well, at least. So it's not useless on defense, but when you get into mid, it kind of struggles. You kind of just pick a side your team is pushing and slider down it, and it's okay. But there's still, like, decent cover and height elevation to deal with it, plus you have to worry about top mid. So there's just a lot of, like, problems there. I think the main is just still pretty good here. Like, the main can play over here, it can play over here. You can poke top mid well, you can play this corner, you can push up here, like... You have plenty of spots to go for the main weapon. It's mostly the slider that struggles. This is one of those stages that would be in an entirely different position if it had another viable kit, but, like, for the slider one, it just kind of sucks. Undertow. This one's, like, weird for slider. You can slider glass, not grass, and go past here. You can try to blow up on the grates to hit underneath, but the timing window is kind of bad. You can blow up their zone, obviously. You can blow up your zone. You can blow up their zone from here. But you don't have, like, much use for aggressive sliders, other than if your team pushes really far, you can go here, and you'll probably catch someone. You get kills here pretty easily. You can't really deal with anyone on high ground up here. You have a hard time crossing to this area, though you can hold it okay if you get there. On defense, it's, like, pretty good at keeping this area and controlling the wall, which is good, because that's where you want to be as a support, typically. You can, like, poke under the ledge as well. It's just another map that, like... Great for Dread. The main weapon can do things here, but bad for Slider. The Slider doesn't get a lot of value on this map. Museum. Oh, no, not Museum. Wahoo World first. I guess the order doesn't matter. We'll do Museum first. At this point, the order is pretty arbitrary. I've actually, like, Museum's kind of grown on me a bit. This used to be one of my least favorite stages for Dread, and I still don't think it's amazing. But, like, the more I play it, the more I have liked it. You have the top rope slider, which is fun. Not super practical. Dread is like pretty good at fighting in either of these corners. You can play the range blaster spot here and poke. It's not as good as RB at doing it. But like sometimes you'll still find like damage or kills on here. You can paint plat from the bottom corner really easily, like all of this, including the spinner. Like you can paint the spinner walls and stuff for your front lines down here. It's pretty easy to retreat into this corner. You can like slider into this area, like slider this way, and threaten to blow up here, and you have like an escape option down there. The explosion on zone can still get like a decent amount of it if you absolutely have to. Dealing with people like over here kind of sucks. Dealing with top mid kind of sucks. And then when you're locked out, you kind of just like slider this side or you do this slider, but this slider can just get shot from top mid. Like you play for one of those to get spinner back, or you just like full send it with your team on the flank. Like if you drop down here, you have like a bubble and crab. You like slider to cross the rest of the way. So I think there's a few different ways you can go about it. Oh my god, we already have a scrim. I did not think this would take this fast. Okay, let's try and keep going here. At least finish out a tier. So, Wahoo World was up next. Wahoo World. Okay. What about this map? I think that... I mean, slider is obviously pretty good for zone. You have to drop here, so it's like... It's not that hard to prevent it from the defending team. Like, this is a pretty bad area. And then even sliding this side, they have to drop down here. So, like, you can't slider super safely. The zone cap isn't super consistent. But this is, like, the opposite of what I've been saying. This is, like, fine for slider, weaker for dread. Like, blowing up over here is good. Blowing up over here. You can go down here. You can blow up behind the pillow. But the main weapon kind of struggles. You have, like, this ledge you can play. You can paint over these walls, but you still have to, like... You still have to respect any front line that's there. You can't just, like... What is it? You have to be a little cautious if anyone's here, even though you can hit over it. So I just think the main doesn't get too much value. You kind of just paint bot for slider on this stage. There's not really a whole lot to do with the main, so you're kind of just playing a lot of reef slider on this map. And you kind of have to deal with it that way. Okay. And then last for this tier is Hammerhead Bridge. Which is like another one I could see going higher. Like with Museum, I've kind of like been a bit better with it. I like up here for slider angle to zone. Like going over here and crossing. You can slider right side of zone. It paints a decent amount. Dread is like pretty good at playing either of the corners. On hold, you can like poke under any of these ledges and it's good. You can poke under this ledge. You can slider through street. You have like a good amount of options here. I think you're pretty good at covering flank. I think it's just this... let me get rid of all this. This part of the map is the awkward part right here. When you're, like, not pushed into their side, but you have control of zone, that's where I kind of don't know where to go. You can't really slider anywhere because this is too committal. Like, you need to be able to slider and threaten to blow up here, because this is where you get around everyone camping you on snipe. So if you need to be further to slider... You can't really clear the pillow as easily, though that's usually where I'm, like, throwing bombs. And you have to be a little cautious of this right side, because, again, you have nothing to slider. So it's like that part of the map is really what lowers it. And then defense can also be a little awkward. Like, you kind of just have to commit slider over here, and your team has to follow up. Like, usually it's going to be you slider like this, clear all of this. Enemy team, if they're smart, will fight you here, and your team has to win this clash over here. Because if they lose the clash, even if you clear space, they just run in your spawn and circle back. And that's just tough to deal with. So, defense is a little situational in that one spot on hold, but everything else is kind of okay. And then we're going to have to restart the recording after the scrim. Alright, back to recording the list until everyone joins the actual room. Next up, where were we? Humpback! Humpback. This is another, like, if the weapon was not attached to slider, this would be amazing. This is one of Dread's best stages. Dread can, like, camp all the ledges. It has a bunch of slopes to play around. Like, I could basically draw a circle around the whole map, right? It's very good here. But the downside is slider here fucking sucks. It gets cut off Buy everything. This is like the only spot you can blow up it works in. You need cooler to QSJ out. Like, yeah, you can explode zone, but you're never gonna kill anyone. Like, most of the time, at least. You're not gonna kill anyone. It's not gonna do too much. It's like, this is the only spot you have. You can never really go for kills. It's just not good slider. That's it. Like, you can cap zone, but it's not good for it any other way. Ship shape. There were a few maps I said could trend higher. This one might trend lower. You can cap zone if they don't paint and you get here. But, like, they should be able to prevent you from doing one of those two things. It should not be hard. This area sucks to fight in. You can slider, like, a decent amount of locations. Like, you could slider back here. So slider's, like, not bad. And you still have the potential cap. Dread's, like, pretty good at fighting these, which are, like, the main part of the map. But it kind of sucks at fighting in court. And you're going to find yourself in court a lot because you need to paint. So, overall, I can see it going lower. But it's not too bad. Brine water. Brine zones. This is good for slider if you have cooler. You can, of course, do the infamous slider back of zone, bomb this one, cap the stage. You can, like, slider over here and catch people really easily. Your weapon's okay at fighting in low ground, like the main is okay fighting there, but for the most part, your main just doesn't have anywhere to go. You can slosh under this ledge, but it doesn't cover that much. You can go left here to slider, but then you have to be careful you're abandoning zone if they, like, flank. So most of the time you're, like, here just bomb spamming, or you're going for big slider plays over here. Which is not bad, it's just kind of limited, all things considered. Next tier is where we'll undo the recording. Alright, next up is A tier, and let's start this with Bluefin. So, Bluefin's kind of complicated to talk about. I think Bluefin can be extremely good for slider, because, like, obviously the zone will, like, not be in the middle most of the time. It'll be on either of these sides. So you have very clumped up groups of players. You can also paint most of the zone. You can, like, slider back here is really good, or back here, because the uninkables can kind of trap people. You can't really slider too far in unless you manage to get, like, up one of these, which is kind of tough. Dread over here is kind of too far out of position, but nothing too bad there. Defense, your slider can, like, either go here or here. Both are good. Right side gets a little further behind. It's not too hard to deal with flank as Dread. You can, like, poke a little bit of damage back here. Overall, just, like, again, has a bit of an awkward part where you're trying to fight up the ramp, but other than that, very solid. Good at outpainting zone. Good at fighting around this covered thing. So, all in all, solid stage. Mahi Mahi Resorts. We get to Mahi. Very flat and open stage, especially when the water drops. I don't think I have a... Is there an overhead of it, maybe? Yeah, I guess this kind of works. Like, obviously, you can see where the water would go down, so... With the water level down, it's a little bit different, but it's not too big a deal. Hold up, I don't know why this song is so loud. Let me turn this down. There we go. With the water level down, it can be a little bit tough. The stage is very open, so you don't really have a whole lot of cover, but it also means your sliders are going to do a lot of damage. On hold, you usually, like, play somewhere down here and just fish for damage, but it's a little committal, or you can play right side and try to cover either of these. Defense can be a little tough, but you're good at covering, like, anyone over here. You can hit people down here. You can hit people down here. It's, like, plenty of, like, ledges to camp. Slider is pretty good, so nothing too crazy here. After that is Crableg Capital. So, Crableg is, like, kind of like Bluefin, where you have a nice slider spot, paints even less of the zone, but, like, clears grates. There's a lot of grates for slider, so it's really easy to find slider value. Usually you just do somewhere along this diagonal, or you can, like, slider down here and also hit people on the grates is good. You can slider across if you get far enough. Either direction is solid. So, like, there's a lot of stuff you can do here that I think is fine. Dread has, like, a little bit of cover to play in these different positions over here, so there's a lot of spots you can play. Not too bad to just play on hold and cover under ledges. You can't really slider in easily, but you can, like, very easily cover space, so nothing too bad. Yeah, alright, anyway. Next stage I have is Barnacle. Go back to the minimap for Barnacle. So, Barnacle, I think the main problem is that you can't really slider stack as easily, which kind of sucks. On defense, that's really the main position you need to get. Because otherwise, it's such a good stage for Dread. Like, the main weapon can poke under here, it can poke under here, you can poke from snipe really well. On hold, you can, like, play any of these. Like, Dread as a main has so many good positions. And then on hold, like, slidering stack is good. Slidering here can catch people on the ramp. If you slider right side, you can slider down the ramp. There's a lot of different angles. The only part that's tough is slidering stack, and even using the blocks and going this way with slider tech doesn't even land you on the stack, which just really sucks, but like that's the only reason it's lower. It doesn't cap zone either, but you can blow up here to get most of it, or if you slider from stack, you can just put your bomb here, go over here, and cap all of their side. Like, both of those could be really good, so I still think it's a good stage. The only thing that keeps it from being higher is just not being able to slider stack. I think Dread could be more aggressive, yeah, for sure. But I still think it has to be, like, the main support of the comp. There'll just be sometimes you go in if you have, like, a dually that can paint, maybe, that's fine. Ramen. We just played this on stream, actually. So, pretty familiar with this map. You have the slider around the pillow here. That isn't on this map, but there's a pillow here normally. You can slider zone. You can slider this corner. Or down here is pretty good. Plenty of slider spots. A lot of good bucket angles. You can reach snipe pretty well from here, so sometimes you'll find kills on like Pen or something sitting behind this wall. So that's pretty useful to have sometimes. Defense retake is pretty easy. There's a lot of space you can cover over here. It's pretty easy to like slider street. And if you're defending, instead of slidering zone, you can also slider this way. Just like chase people in a trench or blow up high ground is pretty good, so all in all, a solid stage. I don't have much negative about it. Scorch. Scorch is just a very good slider map. Dread is very good at playing these corners of the stage as well. It can fight for top mid. You can like slosh under all these ledges on hold, so plenty of places you can like wall out space. And slider will just hit people on grates, or you can even slider across the grates to get through the map, so that's pretty good. All of that is very solid. Up next is... I like to debate the order of Mako and Haggle. I'm just going to put them on here together. I think that Mako has a little bit more bucket angles, but it's a little bit... It can snowball against you a little bit more easily because of how small the map is, but it's good at fighting for either of the stacks. It's good at fighting for left side. Slider spot here is a little predictable. Like, there's not really any places to mix it up, but it's still fine. You can, like, bomb here. There's a pillows here, explosions behind zone. Again, like with Barnacle, you can't really get slider onto stacks if you're losing control. So you can't hit the key area. But that's about it. Like, everything else for it is fine. And then Hagglefish, like with Mako, slider spot's a little tougher, but a little bit harder to push into. Blows up behind zone. You can slider either of the corners. You can slider in their base here or here, depending on if you want to stay in or not for a lot of damage. That's hard to deal with. Defense, you have a lot of space ground to play around here or here, a lot of cover. You can kind of drop either side. You can go left side onto the drop. You can play up here on holds, are very good. Just plenty of spots all around. I think it's a little more open than Mako, but the larger map gives you a little more breathing room when things go wrong. And then X tier would be Manta. I don't think it's the best stage anymore, but very easy to hit grates. You can slider this way out of bunker, which I don't really use. You can slider either of the grates. You have this slider spot going back here. Dread is like very good at fighting in the bunker area in general. Like, it's very easy to like set up here. If you're holding and you have your aggros push further ahead, you can play this side and cover ledges quite easily. Plenty of spots you can go. If you have to retreat back here, Dread is pretty good at dealing with it by hitting over ledges. You can play top of the map here and paint zones safely. There's just a bunch of positions. And even if you push, like, really far in, you can still kind of, like, push this far. You can still poke in. You can still go around on this flank. You can slider back up here if you ever get this far. So there's just a lot of positions for it. You can't cheese zone, I guess. That's, like, the only real downside. And then number 1 is Mincemeat Metalworks. Grates for slider explosions are very good. Can fight on the cars. Can fight in the lower areas. Very easy slider spot off snipe, and you can also still threaten slider through this way. You can slider selfishly on the sides of the map, and it's fine. Like, you can slider here, or you can slider down here very easily, get behind cover. You can even slider across here and kind of poke space if your fronts want to move in either side. Just all around is really good, but I think the main thing that sells it is like just a sheer amount of slider locations, and then everywhere you slider, you're gonna end up good for the main weapon. So it just flows the easiest out of any stage, in my opinion. Like, it'll very simply just go from, like, playing your main to playing slider, and there's not really much interruption. And you still get a cap zone. So, you have the slider cheese if you need to. So, that's my opinion on Dread stages. That's how I would rank my preference on them and where I try to pick two on tournaments. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed.